Training camp news and notes. Is Parris Campbell a fantasy sleeper? Key observations, key takeaways. You name it, we got it on today's show. The top 5 takeaways you need to know for your fantasy draft starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today I'm excited. We've dug deep into training camp week 1 and found some of the top 5 takeaways that you need to know for your fantasy drafts. And I got a special guest, a first time on the podcast with me. I'm super stoked to bring her on in just a second. Before I do, I want to make sure you're following us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. Also give us a like from time to time. We would appreciate it. And also make sure you go to Razzball Fantasy on IG and TikTok as well. We're dropping daily content there as well. And also, finally, make sure you go to the flagship, razzball.com. Not only do we have football, we have baseball, hockey, and basketball as well. And make sure you're checking out all the great new tools, the ADP tool we have on razzball.com right now. I'm going to bring in my guest for today, my co-host, Gladys L. Tyler, my new Razzball writer. I'm super excited to have her on. You can find her on Twitter at Gladys L. Tyler. And make sure you're checking out her latest articles on razzball.com. What's going on, Gladys?
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm stoked.
Hey,
Gladys does all the dirty work for us. What she does, she goes on the trenches on defense. You got to go check these articles out. They're great for preseason content. But now we're going to let her have some fun today and talk some offense. We're giving her a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
So first off, before we get into that, though, we want to make sure we talk some breaking news. And of course, the biggest news that's coming out of today is Tim Patrick suffering his ACL injury, and he's out for the season. So, Gladys, give us your first reaction to this injury.
Sucked. It sucks. Patrick was one of my sleepers for fantasy this year with Russell Wilson there, and it sucks. And I live in Denver too, so it was catastrophically sucking. I think it's good for Judy, but I actually thought that Patrick would be taking some of those throws that Russell Wilson would be making to him. Now they're going to be going to Jerry Jeudy. Cortland Sutton vaults up, I think, undescribably high on the ADP now. But yeah, for Tim Patrick, it just sucks. I feel really bad for him. Everyone was so excited to have Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett there. It just sucks. That was my first impression. Sucking.
I know, right? The honesty is refreshing. It sucks. That's a great way to put it. Because honestly, now the Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy people that were hyping them up are going to be right. Because Tim Patrick gone, and maybe KJ Hamler is now a deep sleeper. Maybe Albert O pops up as a tight end, high-end tight end 2 type range. But really, it's going to be Sutton and Jeudy. I guess the question comes now is how high are they going to go? Because right now today, Sutton's already going in the 4th round range, 4 or 5 turn. Judy's going in the 5-6 turn range. They're going to go up at least a round. I mean, at least. So the question comes, your first reaction, would you take Sutton or Jeudy in a vacuum? And how high are you on to take them?
Well, this is what I'm wondering. I'm wondering now that Patrick is out, will Jeudy move to the outside and Hamler have the slot to himself? So if Hamler has the slot to himself, I'm going for Hamler as a sleeper. And I'm still higher on Sutton than I am on Jeudy. I would take Sutton before Jeudy. Jeudy just hasn't impressed me enough with his ability to stay on field and with his touchdowns. I don't see it miraculously happening because Patrick is out. And I see Hamler kind of, if he can stay healthy, getting in there and taking that slot position not away from him because Judy's going to move to the outside. And I see Hamler being a little bit higher. I think Hamler gets the most boost on ADP from this.
Yeah, I agree. And the slot thing is key because Jeudy was basically a glorified slot receiver for the last few seasons when they were all healthy. He's definitely going to be outside more while Hamler. But this is kind of the Hamler early season Lockett comparisons. Now it could be actually a thing in the slot. So all the narratives are going to come true because of this injury, and I am hating every second of it. That's it. All right, that's enough. We're going to talk more about this stuff later, but let's get into why we're here today to discuss the top 5 NFL training camp takeaways from week 1 of training camps. And really, this is the key here is to talk about the ones that stood out to us and really to talk about how it's going to impact fantasy drafts based on some of the narratives that are already coming out of camp. Let's jump into number 5. This one is interesting. You decided to talk about Mike Gesicki and how he hasn't made much of an impact in the new offense. So let's talk a little bit about this. How do you think this impacts Gesicki and the receivers in Miami?
Okay, so this situation is kind of like a really bad analogy. It's like a marriage of convenience instead of a marriage of compatibility, because McDaniel, coming from Niners offense, wants Gesicki to be a blocking tight end, and Gesicki in his 4 years has not been a blocking tight end. I think I read somewhere on Player Profile where George Kittle he runs routes less than normal, and Gesicki runs them the second most. So it's not going to work. And for those who counted on Gesicki being on the franchise tag and getting high ADP, don't do it. Don't fall for it. Like, everyone's like, well, they franchise tagged him, so they must have like an idea of what they want to do with him, and he might be vital. No, that's not going to happen. They want him to block. He's not a blocker. So it's not going to mesh as well as those who drafted him think it will. And plus, you have Waddle and you have Hill now. They want him to block for the run game. That's that run scheme that McDaniel has. He wants an inline tight end, and that's not what Gesicki does. He likes to be out in the wide. He likes to be in the slot. He's not going to get that. And Gesicki, for his part, has said, hey, I'll do whatever the team needs. I'm not one of the complainer. But he knows he's on a 1-year franchise tag. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to do this for a year, and then see ya. I'm going to find someone who appreciates my actual skill set, and then I'm going to be catching balls, which is not what he's going to be doing this year. So do not draft Gesicki. He's going like ADP. I think it's like the tight end 12, which is still too high. You can find 13 other tight ends that are going to get the ball way more than he will.
Nailed it right on the head, by the way. Gesicki's ADP on the Razzball ADP tool, number 12. That's why we pay her the big bucks, folks. She nails it right on the head. All right, let's get down to number 4, jumping down to Parris Campbell, looking sharp, playing as the number 2 receiver. So, okay, Alex Pierce comes in, and a lot of people get excited about Alex Pierce, the rookie, and he's flashed too, and I'm not saying he hasn't. Parris Campbell, though, also has pedigree. He was a second-round pick a handful of years ago. But really, when you start looking at Parris Campbell, he can't stay healthy. And it's always been health. And when he's on the field, he actually shows some flashes over the last few years with one of the worst trio of quarterbacks over the last few seasons. He had Jacoby Brissett, then Phillip Rivers, and late career Phillip Rivers. And I got tipped to cap the Rivers overall. And then Carson Wentz last year, they really kind of cut down the offense. But really, the key for him is health. And he's looked healthy. And the key is he's also been on the field every single practice, building OTAs with training camp, and now he's constantly they basically called it Parris Campbell season. That's what it saw on the website when I was doing all my research for this show. And when you start looking at his stats from the years past, when he plays at least 50% of snaps, he averages almost 6 targets a game, and that was with a bunch of other quarterbacks that aren't Matt Ryan. And so when I looked at Matt Ryan, I'm thinking to myself, that's the key, because Matt Ryan's number 2 receivers have been very good. Over the last 10 seasons, their average fantasy finish is wide receiver 33. Now, Parris Campbell is going outside. He's actually going 200th overall right now, and that's like wide receiver 60. So when in the past that Matt Ryan has really produced, high-end wide receiver 2s for fantasy football purposes, they also averaged 12.6 PPR points per game. By the way, that would have been Elijah Moore and Terry McLaurin last year. So when I look at the system, the draft cost, the ADP, the dead last pick, you could take him with your last pick in every draft. I think it's worth a shot because the guy has the pedigree. We've seen a lot of Ohio State receivers play very well in the pros. So I'm actually buying Parris Campbell as a deep sleeper this season, and I like what I'm hearing coming out of camp. Let's jump down to number 3. Dalton Schultz is the go-to receiver when Dak is under pressure. So talk to us a little bit about why you wanted to highlight this, Gladys, and what is it about Dalton Schultz you like this year?
All right. So as everyone knows, the tight end pool generally is just like a shallow pool. Like, you have your top 4, and then you go, what am I going to do now? And a lot of leagues are going tight end premiums. Dalton Schultz was tight end 3 last year. He was tight end 3 with Amari Cooper on the field. Amari Cooper's no longer there, and Michael Gallup's return will be iffy at best. We don't know when he's coming back. They lost James Washington to another leg injury, another wide receiver that went down in training camp with a leg injury. So that basically leaves CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz and Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard as Dak Prescott's main guy. Last year, when Dak Prescott targeted Dalton Schultz, he had 122.6 passer rating. So it's not like he's not targeting. Dalton Schultz was also second on the team in red zone targets, and he had like a 51, Dak had like a 51.6 completion rate going to Schultz under pressure all last season. And remember, that was with Cooper, and Cooper was his favorite guy in the lineup. Cooper gone, Schultz is there. He had 104 targets last year. He had 8 touchdowns. He had a 16.4% target share, which was third on the team. Cooper's gone. Cedric Wilson is gone, who was also, at least no one talks about him, but he was like third on the team in receptions, not receptions, but in target share. So you have to think, where's that going to go when the pressure hits? When the pressure hits, even though he's extremely good under pressure, he's going to Schultz. He's going to what he knows. He's going to Schultz, and Schultz should go, his current ADP, I think, is he's going to tight end 6, which I think is too low. I think Schultz should be bounced up there to tight end 3, like where he ended last year. And there's no reason that he won't be there or higher this year with what Prescott has to work with.
Yeah, and he's going – the thing about Dalton Schultz that's key too is that he's going significantly about a round or two after that, George Kittle range. And you could take a receiver at the Kittle spot and then take Schultz a round or two later, and you just brought up he's a top 3 guy from last year. So I absolutely love this, and I'm in. And by the way, you nailed it again. Tight end 6 in Razzball Fantasy ADP. Gotta love it. All right, jumping down to number 2, Russell Gage becoming a go-to target for Tom Brady. Okay, so one thing I love the most about the Julio Jones signing was that now everyone's like, well, I guess Russell Gage is not going to be a thing. Yeah, no, I don't think that's a thing. Honestly, I think Russell Gage has slowly earned his spot on this team. Number 1. The other thing, too, is, yes, Godwin is practicing. He avoided the active PUP. But there's already talk about him not being ready to play in games in week 1. So there's already that factor into all this as well. But let's forget all that for a minute. How's Tom Brady done the last 2 years when he's had Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans on the field? 3 stud receivers on the field together. Okay, so in 2020, the wide receiver 3 on the team was Antonio Brown. He averaged 13.2 PPR points per game. That would have been wide receiver 31 last year. Now in 2021, Tom Brady's back. All 3 guys come back. They didn't play a lot of games. It was only 5 games together. Chris Godwin was the wide receiver 3. He averaged 14.7 PPR points per game. That's wide receiver 20. By the way, that's the wide receiver 3 on the team, not the wide receiver 1 or 2. So you could already see it. And by the way, this is with Gronk in the lineup. So when Gronk's in there, now take Gronk out, Tom Brady isn't boys with Cameron Brate or Kyle Rudolph or Otto or whatever his name is, the rookie. Those guys aren't Gronk. So he's already going to start funneling targets back over to the receivers that he trusts. I think hearing that he's becoming a go-to guy, I love that Julio signed because his ADP is not going to skyrocket at all. And I think you're going to get a guy probably 9, 10, 11 that can easily give you wide receiver 3 production throughout the year. And especially early on in the season when Godwin gets acclimated back. All right, let's get to number 1. Why a bunch of people, we want to give them the big headline. And this is Travis Etienne is the most impressive player from the first week of Jags camp. And I know, Gladys, you want to talk about this. So let's break down Travis Etienne, his situation, and why you're high on him going into this season.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to call him Travis so I don't butcher his last name. No disrespect. Second, I'm not really sure that I'm that high on him. Here's the thing. He's the most impressive. John Shipley is the beat writer for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Etienne has been the most impressive offensive player coming out of camp, which is to say that the wide receiving core that they have has been non-impressive. They're having trouble with Christian Kirk and not even the wide receiver, and tight end Ingram dropping passes. So he's the most impressive on a mediocre, impressive team. Now, don't get me wrong. Travis Etienne is showing up. He is showing up and he's showing out. He has shown that he's coming back from the Liz Frank injury. I would pump the brakes because Doug Peterson is not known to use his running backs in the receiving position. Although during training camp, they have put Travis in all formations. So he can play all formations. He has that relationship with Trevor Lawrence where he had 48 receptions in his last season playing with him. So Lawrence knows what he's capable of. But you got to remember that when they say he's the most impressive player coming out of that training camp on the offensive side, it's kind of a low bar. It's kind of a low bar that they're comparing him to. And James Robinson apparently is coming back earlier than expected. Like, he's on the field, minimal practice, but he is still coming back from that Achilles injury sooner than most had hoped. Etienne was going high in ADP when people thought Robinson would be back till midseason. It looks like he's going to be back at least in the first 3 games, although Peterson has said we're not going to put Robinson out there until he is 100% or better, which means they probably will delay his coming in. Etienne is probably, I think he's going as running back 25 right now. That's probably a good mid-range for him. That's probably where you want to try to take him. That offense isn't going to be good. The run offense is going to be good, but everyone knows that it's the run offense and it's going to be good. So Etienne's going to get PPR. He should go higher than standard leagues because he does have that ceiling for catching passes. But just remember, this is his first year. He's basically a rookie. He got to escape the Urban Meyer fiasco because of the Liz Frank injury, which I guess it's good and bad. He had
probably a good thing.
Yeah, he didn't have to play under Urban Meyer, which is good. So he has Doug Peterson, which is better. And one more thing to remember is that when Doug Peterson coached in Philly, his team had the fastest plays. The offense played fastest in any other offense all 5 years. So they're going to get lots of plays on the field. Let's just hope that Etienne doesn't get stuck with that. Oh my God, that's all they have. And Christian Kirk can't catch the ball and Ingram can't catch the ball. So let's stack the box kind of mentality.
So you did bring this up. He actually is going 20th in our ADP tracker, and he's going 43rd overall. So I guess my quick question for you is, he's going ahead of that's a really good area for wide receivers. You got Cortland Sutton, who just, by the way, we talked about. Mike Williams going behind him. Are you willing to take Travis Etienne right there, or are you going to pivot to one of those receivers or maybe a tight end like Darren Waller?
I'm not going to pivot to Darren Waller, but I would pivot to Cortland Sutton going there. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sold on Mike Williams. I think he's a touchdown or bust kind of guy in that offense. He has Keenan Allen that he's working with. That's just a loaded offense. And but yeah, I would take Etienne. I would take Travis right about there if I could get him.
Okay.
Running backs are like tight end pools to me. They're not very shallow, but to find a running back who has the dual threat capabilities, whether or not they're going to use them, if you can get a fourth round? Is that fourth round? Yeah. If you can get a mid-4th round, I say grab all of it and run. No pun intended.
All right, we're going to listen. Grab all of it is a great way to end the show, folks. That's all we got for today. That is the top 5 takeaways from NFL training camp for week 1. So listen, we're going to have plenty of takeaways for the rest of this. We're going to have preseason takeaways. We're excited. Gladys, you nailed it, by the way. We're going to have you back on at this point. It's got to happen. And by the way, we want to make sure that everyone is following you. So why don't you tell a little bit about what you've been doing at Razzball? Maybe highlight an upcoming article. Tell the people what's coming up for you and your articles on Razzball.com.
Okay, so I know you all are so interested in the offense, and your drafts are coming up, and you want to draft, the best offensive players. But you got to remember that the best offensive players are going to go against defenses. So I write about the defenses that you should be worried about when you're drafting your offensive players. And the next article actually will be the top 5 defenses that are rising, the top 5 defenses that are falling, and who they're playing in the first and second week. So when you're drafting, and if you've already drafted, who you want to play and who you want to sit, because that's as important as how many targets this guy's going to get and if the targets are going to be clean or not. So come on Razzball and check me out, check my articles out. That was so weird. And we'll have the defenses that you need, and plus, like you said, there's everything on Razzball. You're gonna want to read the defensive articles, but you're gonna want to read what the guys are talking about on offense and what they're talking about in baseball, and just ignore the New York Giants paraphernalia that you see behind you. It's all right. You know, it gets better. It's okay.
She fires a shot at the last second, right before the end of the show. I already invited you back, so now all of a sudden here comes the truth. All right, that's it. I'm cutting you off. That's all we got for today, folks. Make sure you're following us once again at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube. Make sure you also check us out on IG and TikTok at Razzball Fantasy, and also make sure you go to razzball.com for all those great articles from Gladys and myself. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Make sure you find Gladys at Gladys L. Tyler on Twitter. We are out of here.